Hello and welcome back to the Cookie Jar Golf Podcast. It's Bruce here and I hope you're all well during these peculiar times and hopefully getting the chance to play some golf. Don't forget you can get in touch with us at Cookie Jar Golf, and that's on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter. We do very much enjoy hearing from you all. Today, Tom and I are joined by Jonathan Yarwood. Jonathan is a teaching professional ranked in the top 100 in America by Golf Magazine. He began teaching in the UK and moved to the US where he worked under David Ledbetter, and he's worked with winners at every level, including 2005 US Open champion Michael Campbell. We recorded this pod a couple of weeks ago and it was great to get Jonathan's take on the return to live golf, the Tiger Phil match, his career in teaching, and also some interesting opinions he has on the current state of modern golf instruction. So without further ado, I bring you Jonathan Yarwood.
Watch this. No way!
Jonathan, thanks very much for coming on the podcast. How are you finding the lockdown period?
Well, compared to what you guys are doing in the UK, it's a little different here in America. It's a lot softer lockdown, I would suggest. People are not taking it quite as serious as you are there. I think the message from the top with Mr. Trump is not as strong as it is from Boris, and not as well organised as it is from Boris. So, it's okay. I'm used to being busy and being out there. I'm not out there as much as normal, but I tell you, my online lesson stuff is absolutely on fire. I'm up 700% on those things, and really enjoying helping people from all over the world and seeing some funny sights. Actually, I'm seeing people, whacking drivers in their living room with a missus on the couch next to them watching TV. I've a guy in a paint shed hitting it into a bloody mattress. All the way down to one guy who's got a swing catalyst force plate studio. So. I'm seeing a gambit across the board, but really making some good progress in it and enjoying it and get some really good feedback. So from that perspective, it's been good. I also think it's been great. I don't know how you guys feel personally, Tom and Bruce, but I think it's been great to slow down a bit, to be honest, and reboot, restock your life a little bit, and just have a little think about the direction you go in and stuff like that. So I've quite enjoyed that introspection period as well, actually.
Yeah, you obviously work with a lot of tour players and up and coming junior players. Do you think it's been a much needed sort of rest period for them, giving them time to reflect and maybe refine some of their goals?
Yeah, I've been talking to a few players. I had Lee Westwood on one of my podcasts, Robert Rock, and a few of those guys, and it's a very strange period for them because you think about it, they're used to being on the road, right? And their families are used to them being on the road. And all of a sudden, they're not. They're at home like a normal husband and a normal guy. And I tell you what, there has to be a decompression period there for them. And you just wonder, if some of them think, okay, this is how life should be. Because listen, on the road's tough. It's much tougher than you think. You get the guilt of being away. You get the absent father guilt and all the other stuff. And all of a sudden now you stay in the family bosom, as it were. And, it's interesting how different players have reacted to that. I think we're obviously quite a long way in now. We're a couple of months into this pandemic and kind of gently coming out the other side. It's some guys, I would say, have reacted in certain ways and some in other ways. And I would say they're all chomping at the bit now to get out there because the missus is probably having a go at them a few times now. A few arguments flying around. But, I think it's been good for the amateur players as well. A lot of the players I work with have still kept practicing. They've been in the garden, they've been on the range, on the golf course, kept things trucking along, been doing lots of online stuff with lots of different people. So, I think, again, for everyone, just to kind of reevaluate. And also, one of the big things for me, and I don't suppose I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on it, losing sport on TV, it feels like a big hole in my life, right? It does to me. I like watching the football, I like watching the rugby, I like watching, whatever's going on, tennis, like getting excited about Wimbledon coming. All those mile markers have disappeared, haven't they? And it kind of leaves you a little bit bereft, really. So I've been killing YouTube. I've been rewatching British Opens and Wimbledons, and actually been watching a lot of Mike Tyson, actually, strangely enough. I know it's a really random thing, but I all of a sudden started having a massive interest in Mike Tyson's career. Yeah. What a bloody athlete that guy was. I know he's not a great person, but geez, what an animal at one stage. But so, a lot of variety in it. I don't know what your thoughts on it.
Well, I think it's quite interesting over here. I think for me, as someone who got into the game not a phenomenally long time ago, what they started doing on Sky is they've been running a lot of really, well, not really old, but sort of old competitions going back to the 80s or 70s, a lot of reruns. And it's quite nice to fill in some of the blanks of history that I think that I had, which is quite useful for me in a way, because they've obviously had to try and put content on somewhere. And that's been quite useful, actually. But I hear what you're saying. I mean, the absence of live sport it's just tough, isn't it? But hopefully June is for the PGA. Is that right? Is that what you guys are hearing?
Yeah, they're going to come to Harbour Town, where I am, the second tournament of the year in June. I don't think there's any spectators, but they're going to come into town. They probably won't after they see my video of the non-lockdown in Hilton Head, but we've got 125,000 hits on Twitter. But I know Lee Westwood probably won't, because he commented on it and went, don't think I'm coming to that one. I think, very interesting period. And, I think it makes you appreciate all we had and what we will have in the future. And hopefully, everyone will remember this period where we lost all that. And, now we can watch it again and get it back. And the other little thing I've been doing as well with live sport, I've been having Sevi Fests all the time. As everyone knows, I'm a big Sevi fan. That's his shoes behind me, actually. Gave him a lesson, and he left his shoes behind, and he said I could keep them. So I've been having some Sevi Fests and been in bits up one of them. You watch a documentary about Sevi's life on YouTube, bloody hell, there won't be a dry eye in the house there.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible story, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I think Billy Foster telling the story of him punching himself in the face and making his nose bleed, I think at Wentworth, and where it just shows you what a character he was. And I mean, there's definitely a lot of great content out there on YouTube, and certainly with stuff like Sky back here in the UK that's been keeping us pretty occupied. You mentioned there you're based at Hilton Head in South Carolina. Perhaps for our listeners' benefit, perhaps you could give a potted history of your career in golf instruction, beginning back in the UK and going from a PGA pro to, traveling across the globe and finally settling in the US.
I was a pretty ordinary player as a kid. I scraped into the PGA level, got interested in coaching very early on. I got exposed to some good mentors in the UK. I hung around with a girl called Helen Dobson, who at the time was one of the best amateurs in UK history. She won all 4 amateur majors. I used to dabble around helping her a little bit, and then she went off and won an LPGA event when I was like 21, 22, something like that. And that got me to go to America with her to train in the winter. We happened to train at Lake Nona with David Ledbetter. I got on well with David. I used to keep a Filofax. That's how old it is, this story. I used to keep a Filofax, and in my little Filofax, I drew stick figures of how I thought the golf swing should work. Okay, posture does this, start does that, this does that, this does that. And I wrote it all down, like page for page, and little notes and stuff like that. And then I went and saw David at Lake Nona, and he'd just come out with a book, the Golf Swing, which is a seminal book about obviously how to swing it good. And it kind of matched my philosophy, really, and a lot of my ideas, really. Some of the pages were absolutely verbatim. So we got on really well, and he took me under his wing, and, he's definitely one of the best people in golf, in my opinion, and he's one of the best people you'll ever meet, never mind in golf. And he's always been great to me. He's looked after me. I've spent hours and hours and hours with him. There's so many myths about him, you're a Ledbetter coach, you teach a Ledbetter method. That's absolute crap. He teaches 1,000 different swings in 1,000 different ways to 1,000 different players, and he's a very creative and artistic person. And so I worked with him for a while, and then I went down to an academy down in Florida called IMG Academies, which was a hothouse for juniors. I was teaching players on so many different tours, colleges. I was so busy when I look back at that time. I was in Australia 1 minute, and then I was on a college tour, and then I went to the PGA tour, and then all this, it kind of just was manic, really. I couldn't do it at this age. And then I coached the US Amateur Champion, which was a big deal. Then I coached another US Amateur Champion, and Michael Campbell came back and forth a little bit, and he won the US Open, and it kind of snowballed like that, really. I had a lot of success. I was very fortunate. I'm only a bit part player in the background. Someone once said to me, I'm the best coach no one's ever heard of. And I was quite proud of that, really, because to me, it's not about me. It's about them. It's not about my ego. It's about helping them. And I think too many people do it the other way around. It's too much about them and not enough about the player. So I was quite happy to be in the background and just keep achieving success and just getting good at what I thought was good at what I do. just kind of went from there. I coached 5 USGA champions. I coached a winner on 7 tours around the world. An amateur number one, a junior number one, you name it. I've kind of been there and done it to some extent. So I've enjoyed going around the world. I've travelled all over the place. I've been to 40 or 50 majors. I've coached on almost every continent around the world, and I've gone around the world on someone else's dollar and often in a private jet. So that's pretty good from a county estate in Skegness. I came to America with a suitcase, and that was it.
Wow, that's an incredible story. I mean, you mentioned there you obviously coached the whole sort of gamut of players from, obviously the up and coming juniors who are perhaps just starting out in the game, and then maybe eventually they want to try and get a college scholarship, as well as the sort of established players who come to you having already played the game at a high level. Does your approach to teaching them kind of vary depending on whether you've kind of got a blank canvas, as it were, in the case of a junior versus someone who you're kind of maybe trying to recapture some of the things that they're doing in their swing that made them
definitely.
Great.
When you get a player, let's say Michael Campbell came to me, he was 300 and something in the world, he's in a slump, like a lot of players were. That's a totally different approach to developing a kid from 11 years old to the tour, which I've done a few times. That's the long-term athletic development's a little bit easier, actually, because you can create performance by design. You can build the player how you want. And, the reason there's such strength in depth nowadays is because, with the advent of modern technology, when I look at someone's swing, I use fact, not opinion. So I've got 3D motion plates going. I've got a pressure plate going. I've got vertical, horizontal, and torque forces running. I've got TrackMan going, and I've got video going. So I can get a 360 view of someone's swing from a factual perspective without any guesswork. And then I can evidentially improve it and change it, again, with no guesswork and no opinion. Long-term development's a little easier. When you get a guy who's on a slump or, a little in what I call golf hospital, then you've got to be a bit more of a surgeon. Sometimes it's microsurgery, sometimes it's psychology, sometimes what I do with those type of players is always look back at what they did when they played their best. I spoke to Sean Foley about it when he was helping Willett. And he said, look, they were trying to get him to go this way with the TrackMan and try and do this, try and do that. And yet when he played his best, his path was 4 to the right. His angle of attack was 1 down, or whatever it was. I can't remember the numbers. But, so a lot of the top guys do that. They look back at what worked, what you did right, and why did you change it. And then with the hospital guys who are in rehab, there's a big psychological element as well, because they've often got some big scar tissue, and it's so easy getting in a slump on the tour. I mean, it's incredible the spotlight these guys are under, which is why I never, ever, ever in any sport criticize anyone who's playing that game on TV, whatever sport it is, because I'm sat on the couch and they're not. They're giving it a go. They're in the arena. They're exposed. And we're never in that position. I'm not exposed. Well, to some extent I am, but, most normal people are not. And so you've got to give them great admiration for taking the pressure and being able to perform when they need to. So the approach are very different. And each, just to close on that, the approach of each person within those approaches is different. It's a case-by-case basis, and the older I get, the more into it I get, the more of a bespoke approach it is.
Well, just jumping in before we turn on to Michael Campbell. Did you happen to catch the Tiger Phil match that was on the other day?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, it was interesting, wasn't it?
It's interesting that you say that you've got to respect the guys that are putting themselves out there. Obviously, Tom Brady isn't a professional golfer. He's an outstanding athlete and a professional American footballer. What, as a coach, when you were watching that, how did you see sort of the swing changes that he made? Obviously, the first 6 holes wasn't playing great, and then all of a sudden he just starts striping it. What would you, if you had the opportunity to say to him, do something in your swing in the first 6 holes, what would you have said?
I think, listen, they're amateur players playing in front of millions of people in a sport they don't really know, right? So, they're bound to be nervous. So, I mean, obviously, I think Tom Brady's got a great little golf swing, personally. I wouldn't have told him anything technically. He's obviously got a little toolbox of things he uses. And, I think he has to have been nervous, no matter, he's just a human being. He's in front of Tiger Woods, Phil Mickelson, and all these players not in the arena of comfort that his sport is. So, again, massively respect what they've done there. And it must have took 5 or 6 holes to settle down. It has to have done. And you saw how good he was, when he hit that shot that was kind of spun back into the hole, and it's cool as you like. That was, and that's what you want, made for TV. That was, wasn't it?
Well, it was absolutely brilliant, wasn't it? Because obviously you can see how his guile came through, because he was starting to get in some shit from Chuck over the earpiece, and he's there saying, "Like Brady, you're not doing well at all," and he's just sort of one back into the hole. It was a proper shot, wasn't it?
They're ballsy people, aren't they? Again, they're just great athletes. They're used to performance, and they're used to, they've got something different. I think, just through experience more than anything, they can turn things on and turn things off. I mean, if that was me and I was playing with Tiger and Phil in front of all those people, I'd top the first 14 shots. I know I would, be so nervous, it'd be ridiculous, and it's so easy to forget that. And some amateur swings are a little bit on a knife edge, timing wise here and there, and you throw a little bit of heat on it, and it kind of crumbles a little bit. Which is why, great swings like someone. Ironically, one of the greatest, most talented players was playing in front of you there on that thing. From a compensation in the swing perspective, Phil Mickelson. My God, I slowed that thing down the other day. That thing's on an absolute millimetre knife edge of going sideways, and yet every time the Pro Tracer's straight down it. You just think, okay, that's some of the best hand-eye coordination on the planet right there, and it really is.
I think Grant Waite said that, in all the years he was out playing on tour, and even now as the established coach he is, Grant Waite reckons that Phil Mickelson's got the best hand-eye coordination of any golfer who's ever lived.
Yeah, there's no question about it, and obviously some of the strongest mentality as well. He's a really good guy, Phil. I really like him, and he's a very intelligent guy actually, and he makes a lot of money away from golf. What he makes on the golf course is a lot of money, but compared to what he makes elsewhere is peanuts.
Really?
He's a real finance guy, does all sorts of stuff. So, he's a good guy. But incredibly talented. But I thought it was great to see Tiger swinging so nicely still. He looks like he's moving all right. GC drove it well. You can tell what they've been doing in lockdown, and it's not sitting on the couch, that is for sure.
Yeah, when you look at Tiger, obviously, you've been around the game for a long time and seen him up close, going through his various iterations of his swing. When you look at someone like Tiger, do you think it's more a case of just keeping the body in shape and actually playing a condensed schedule and being sensible that's going to lead to the success for him, rather than any kind of mechanical or technical deficiency?
Well, he's actually, I'd agree. He's got to keep his body in check, and he spends most of his time on prehab than anything, I would suggest. But he has done some really nice changes in his swing. It looks so much better than it used to. He's losing. People say, he loses a lot of height in transition. Well, he does, but it's a good thing. If you're pushing into the ground and then you rotate and jump out of the ground at the right time, it's a really good thing, which is why he hits it so far. But what he's done is he's managed how much he loses height, so he's not overdoing it. And then he's really rotating nicely through the ball compared to what he used to. He used to get very tilted this way with his shoulder. So he never really got out of his own way. So he'd hit it all over the place with his driver. Now he looks so much more level through it. He's got less side bend. Is the technical name for it. He's got a little less side bend with his driver, a little less forward bend in transition. And it's looking really clean, and I really like it. And, that guy obviously is a talisman for our game, in my view. You just have to look at the amount of people who watch the game who are outside the game that he brings into the sport, which is the most important thing. He brings a fresh audience every time. He just brings a sport lover. And out of those 5 million sport lovers he brings to every telecast, hey, you might have 100,000, go and give it a go just because of him.
Yeah.
So, that guy's done more for the game than anyone. So it was great to see him looking so sharp. And, I can't wait to see him out there. But I totally agree with you, Bruce. He's got to really manage his schedule, which he does. He's got to manage his body, which he does. He's surrounded by experts. But, hats off to his coach. He's got a coach in the background. And, again, I like him because he likes to keep really quiet. He doesn't want anyone to know what's going on. You see him every now and then on a telecast, but no one ever talks about it. He's like this mystical ghost. And he's done some great work with him, I think.
Do you think if he manages to keep his body in check, we can get majors 16, 17 and 18 done?
Well, of course, definitely. And we talk quite flippantly about it, but you've got no idea how hard it is to win a major. Obviously, I've coached a player that won a major, so I know what goes into it. And the conditions those guys play under and what you see on TV, they don't correlate. So many times I've come back from an event and watched the last weekend round or whatever it is on TV, and I've gone, what? That looks so easy. And yet when you're there, you go, okay, this is pretty much impossible, this shot, or that hole is almost impossible to play. Or I remember standing on the tee at the US Open, and I've never seen a narrow fairway in my life, and there's like hay on either side. I just thought, well, you can give me 100 balls, I'm not hitting that fairway. No way. And you go to Augusta, and you see how ridiculously fast the greens get. In my view, it's almost Mickey Mouse at times. I mean, they've got a sub-air system and they fool the players on a Wednesday. They think, oh, yeah, they're pretty fast, like 14 or something. Then they put the sub-air on, and so on Thursday, they're going purple already because they've sucked all the moisture out overnight. They're another 2 faster. So, it's you just got no idea how tough those majors are. So to win them is amazing. For us to flippantly say, oh, can he win them? Hey, there's no question about it, because but it's not an easy task. But if he can stay healthy with his mentality, his experience, which really is the essence of how you win a major, really, it's guts and brawn at the end of the day is how you do it. He's got that in spades, hasn't he? So, it's just unfortunate some of the players have brought up in that era of Tiger. His domination's really affected their tally, hasn't it? Which is unfortunate for some of them. But I definitely think he can, Tom. I think it'd be, if he gets out of the gate, you never know. I thought it'd be quite interesting this year with the pandemic that they might condense all the majors together, but I don't think they have, obviously. But it would have been quite interesting to have like a major, and then 3 weeks later another one, then 3 weeks later another one at a weird time of year. Because if someone got hot in that period, because players obviously they get hot and cold, and they play well about 6 weeks a year. But you got someone who's hot in that 3 week period, like Rory or someone, they probably win all three. Yeah, it would have been quite an interesting thing.
Yeah, just diving into the Michael Campbell story in a little bit more depth. I mean, Michael turned pro in 1993 and he had a great beginning to his European tour career. I think he won 6 times between 99 and 2003. And then 2005, he starts the season with 5 missed cuts, I think. And there's this phenomenal story of him going to Walton Heath the first year that they held the sectional qualifying. And I was lucky enough to be at Walton Heath a few months ago before the lockdown and see the plaque they've got up there in the clubhouse, just talking about Campbell holding that 6-foot putt on the last green there just to get into the US Open. And obviously he goes on and wins it at Pinehurst on a notoriously difficult setup. Could you just give us a bit of an idea of what it was like, going into that event, I guess on the back of that kind of unfortunate run of form, and how things developed as the week kind of progressed?
He's always been an up and down player. It's as simple as that. It's just his mentality. He's a fight or flight guy, and when he wants to be a warrior, there's no one better in the world, as he proved. But when he loses interest, which some of them do, it's like, hey, I can't be bothered. So it's just his mentality. It's just how he was. So he's always going to have a roller coaster career, which he did. He won 15 times around the world, though, and the same year of the US Open, he won the World Match Play, which is the biggest check in golf. So he kind of cashed out that year quite nicely. And I think there's a school of major winners who, can deal with it and can't. And I think he struggled a little bit with some of it. I think, it was an interesting period. He came to that tournament, as you say, missed a few cuts. He came with a broom handle putter, actually. Which was really unusual because he's normally historically a very good putter, and he'd been hitting the ball great, he said, but he said, my putting's gone, like somebody who's panicking, like they've got the yips or something. And again, I used so what I did, I took him away from the venue, which we often do actually, and Tiger does a lot, which people don't know. We go away from the venue because there's so much crap that goes on. It's so distracting. You can't get any work done. So we went to a golf course down the road called Pine Needles.
Oh, yeah.
And it's very quiet there. There was no one around. The pro leaders out on the putting green. And again, I used a fact-based, evidence-based approach to things and took the emotion out of it, first of all. I spent a lot of time with Scotty Cameron at the time. And so we were doing a lot of ball performance filming. And so what I did, I just said, okay, let's film the ball and your stroke with the broom handle. Let's film the ball and your stroke with your normal putter and see if there's any benefits. So we did. And there was no benefit whatsoever, and it was slightly worse. So that took that out of the equation. So then he's like, okay, well, it's not going to help me. Look, there's the facts. And then I just rebuilt his normal putting stroke, which had deteriorated, and got the ball rolling how it should roll. And, the rest is history. It was number one putter that week. And then, course management-wise on that golf course, I figured out in the practice rounds that, hey, it's a Donald Ross. They're up the bowl-shaped greens. They're going to be rock hard and fast. No one's going to hold the green. No matter how good a shot you hit, you're not going to hold at least 50% of those greens. You could hit almost a perfect shot and roll off the green. So then I said, right, okay, so that's what's going to happen, Campbell. There's your expectations. Right, let's plan on how we're going to create a really artistic short game around this type of green. So we fiddled around with different shots. We started off trying to hit hybrids up slopes, which didn't work, and then we hit 3 woods up slopes, and then we create. If you look on my social media feed, at some of the tour player shots that I've actually shown on there, which really transcend and fly in the face of the conventional ways of chipping and stuff like that. There's ways of increasing the spin loft, the dynamic loft, to really burn a chip with very little risk. There's a lob shot on there, which is a no risk, no brainer lob shot, which goes up your nose nearly, and you'll never miss hit it. So there's lots of very artistic and creative things we put in that week. And then from a mental perspective, my mental side with him, we didn't have a psychologist with us that week, but he has worked with them, was once he got going quite nicely, was just to say, look, you're under the radar. Everyone expects you to screw up. So don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. And then all we talked about the whole week was, there's 18 flags, 18 tees. Anything else, you're bringing that to the table. And you can diffuse it. If you're aware of it, you can diffuse it. So we just totally kept reminding, okay, 18 flags, 18 tees, 18 flags, 18 tees. And listen, that'll work for someone in the monthly medal. If you get distracted and you start thinking about obviously not the monthly medal, but with the TV, but you might think of the TV, you might think where you are in the field, you might think who you're playing against. 18 flags, 18 tees, mate. Get on with your process. Your process is this, this, and this, and stick to it. And, I was really, probably one of my proudest coaching moments was when he was on 15 in the last round. There's a massive Tiger roar. Tiger was in his prime. Everyone was scared of him. And there was a massive Tiger roar ahead of him where he just made birdie. And he was coming at him, and Campbell's literally over his shot, and he backed off, had another practice swing, walked in, and hit the shot to about 15 feet, 5-iron. And at that point, I thought, right, okay, that swing is technically robust enough to stand up to the biggest, strongest cauldron in golf. I was really proud of that.
Yeah, that's an incredible story, and I mean, to hold off a charging Tiger Woods in his prime. I guess the emotions on the 72nd green there, or even just before then, as you kind of sense going down the last with the 3-shot lead, I think he had.
Yeah,
that must have been quite a cool moment in your coaching career as well.
Well, I'll tell you a little story about that in a second. But his caddy had a really important bearing on that. Actually, on the 71st hole, the par 3, it's 7-iron normally. Pin was back. You don't want to hit it long. And his caddy saw he was amped up, right? He could tell he was amped up. So he said, hey, I'm going to give you 8-iron here. So he just said, look, trust me. And he gave him 8-iron. He nuked it. He hit it where it needed to go. And, the rest is history. He made birdie there, and then off he was running. So, all power to him. And then I had the best week of my life that week because I had a new child. Michael won the US Open. I got a nice juicy check. And then he called me and said, Jonathan, I know you've always wanted a Porsche. Go out and buy yourself any 911 you want, and I'll buy it. So
wow.
You can't get a better week than that. So, yeah.
So in a broader sense then, Jonathan, how do you see the professional golf tradition as a whole really having changed, in the process of your career? I mean, particularly with the abundance of new information that's available out there. I mean, you mentioned launch monitors, the 3D biomechanics stuff, force plates. Do you think coaching on the whole's improved quite a bit since you've been around, or has the standard of play improved as well?
Well, I don't think the standard of play has improved enormously because golf is intrinsically a difficult game, isn't it? There's so many things that make it difficult. It's a static ball. That's the toughest thing about it. There's not many sports that you can think of that have got a static ball where you provide the propulsion, the elevation, and the direction. I mean, snooker's a static ball game, but you're not trying to launch the ball in the air and that, you're just using spins and stuff. So, and then you've got the game within the game, haven't you? You've got putting, chipping, bunkers. It's so multifaceted. And, that's why it hasn't improved massively at the amateur level, the club level, let's say, but the elite amateur level, it's improved enormously. And the professional level has improved enormously, and that's really through the advent of really good practice. It's easy to share good practice, and I don't mean hitting balls practice. I mean good practice in all the different areas. So, it's easily shared on the internet, isn't it? The stuff I used to know with Leadbetter 25 years ago was unique to us. No one knew it. It's like the magic code. It's like you had one up on everybody. But nowadays you can go and Google it. You can go and figure it out. You can go to a seminar about it. And you can get armed with good information. So I think coaching across the board's improved, and there's no doubt about that, at the elite level and the professional level, which is why there's such strength in depth. And then again, you're taking a lot of the guesswork out with using modern technology, using the sort of approach that I do, which is a fact and evidence-based approach, which we talked about earlier. And really, taking the opinion away, really. But at the end of the day, golf coaching, in my view, especially at the elite level, is part art and it's part science, right? A TrackMan's not going to make you a great player, but a TrackMan in the hands of a good coach might really improve your knowledge of how to make that ball go better. So when you're under the gun, you've got a little feel or a little, if I do this with my shoulder, geez, the angle of attack goes up 3. I know that. Okay, well, that's good. Okay, well, you've used technology well there. So, at the end of the day, it's still man management. It's still artistic at the delivery. I pride myself on the fact that, I've got all these things at my disposal, TrackMan, blah, 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 blah. But no matter what I'm doing with a player, I'll never give more than one piece of information on the way back and one piece of information on the way down. And if you really know what you're doing, those 2 pieces of information will change the TrackMan numbers. They'll change the force points. I work a lot on precision, really making the force work at the right point, the horizontal force, the torque force, and the vertical force to maximize people's distance, and the video as well. And if you know what you're doing, those 2 little words, 2 little artistic feels, or whatever you want to call them, will make a big difference to an elite player. But at the club level, the show goes on as normal, really, doesn't it, to some extent? But it's a whole different ball game. I think there should, the bifurcation debate, in my view, what's wrong with letting Mr. Havercam or Mr. Club Captain having a driver that goes slightly further than it should do? What's wrong with that? I don't see what the problem is. It's definitely a problem in the professional game, but in the amateur game, Mr. Club Captain could have what he wants, I think.
It's interesting you just mentioned about the feels. I mean, it's a very different thing knowing what's wrong with your swing and then fixing it. And often it's actually a bit of information that's not directly related to what you think is wrong. Do you find that with the coaching, that it's a certain sort of feels for a certain player, and what you're trying to fix might be the same thing, but they're different feels?
Yeah, it's a case-by-case basis, but a good coach that's worth his salt will understand the laws of cause and effect, right? So it's like, okay, the path's doing this, the angle of attack's doing that, the face is doing this, the strike point's doing that, the dynamic loft's doing this, the spin loft's doing that. Okay, that's the effect. All TrackMan shows you is the effect. It doesn't show you the cause, right? You've still got to fix the cause. Okay, so what caused that dynamic loft to do that, the spin loft to do this? Why is the torque force going too early? Why is there too much horizontal force? So your role is to be like a detective and go, okay, well, that and that's happening, but it's caused by this, this, and this. And like you say, Tom, it's often, sometimes quite counterintuitive. And, you and Bruce could have the same problem, let's say, in your swing. So you could both come over the top, let's say, as a broad example. I know Bruce would never do that because he's a hot player. But
I'm the other way. I'm far too dumped under from the inside.
So let's say you both had the same issue. I would probably fix it in totally different ways for both of you, and maybe a totally different feel, totally different drill, and even totally different vocabulary and tone as well, which I think is very important, because I'd need to kind of get into you a little bit and into your psyche. And, as I say, it's all a case-by-case basis. I might be joking with one of you, I might be more serious with the other one. It might be, okay, more fact-based with one, it might be more feel-based with the other. So, again, the approach varies across the board, really.
Yeah, one thing you mentioned, or that it seems, just having looked at your teaching philosophy online, that you seem to be quite sort of big on is the mind being the glue that holds everything together. And it got me thinking about a friend of mine who played college golf at a very high level and received some pretty high level coaching as well while he was at it. And although his knowledge of the swing came on leaps and bounds, he didn't actually feel like it made his long game all that much better, and it was his short game, bizarrely, which he wasn't working on as much, which actually improved and kind of kept him competing at a decent-ish level. Do you think there's a tendency with sort of new age instruction and some of the sort of modern focus on kind of the real science of the swing that you can actually lose that kind of art form and the ability to actually go out under the gun and just sort of focus on a couple of things and remember that it's just a game and you've got to get the ball in the hole in the fewest shots?
I bang that drum all day long. It's, there's almost a little subculture of coaches who are like so into the science side, they don't know how to apply it. You know, it's not a science project. It's an artistic golf game. You know, golf's it's an ever-changing game in a difficult environment, isn't it? You know, so you've got to be able to solve problems with this thing. You know, you ain't going to solve problems by worrying about what your torque force is doing or what your vertical force is doing, etc. You do that in practice to try and make it as efficient as possible. But then when you get into the arena, you compensate and you compete. You might default back to a swing you don't like, but again, you've got to develop shots that you can go to. You know, so you can still compete. And there's one thing I really hate is people, coaches, almost doing it for their own good rather than the good of the player, getting so into it and so scientific and talking so sciencey, you know, and being a pseudo-scientist to some extent, you know, just plagiarizing information, you know, making themselves look like they're a biomechanist and blah, blah, blah. I'm not a biomechanist. That's an insult to a biomechanist. They've got PhDs in this thing. They've been to college for 12 years. I haven't. I can definitely go and talk to them, and I can definitely understand what they do, and I can definitely get some good information that I can apply. But I'm not a biomechanist. I know stuff about it, right? And I know it to a good level, to the point where I can manifest change, but I'd never go around talking to a player like a biomechanist. My vocabulary, I look at myself as the filter, the conduit from all this great information, all this great technology and information. All it does is allow me to make an informed choice. That's all. So from that informed choice, I can then be the conduit that goes, well, you know, this is what we're seeing. This is the evidence. You know, there's too much of this, too much of that. Okay, well, you know, in easy terms, right, all you got to do is get your left shoulder down like that and spin your rib cage faster.
Yeah.
There you go. Oh, you just changed it all. You changed the torque, you changed this, you changed that. You know, I wouldn't go to a player and go, well, mate, yeah. And then all these online debates they all have between them, you know.
Well, that was another thing I was going to ask you about, actually. Yeah. Yeah. It's something that I, you know, as a layman kind of looking in on it, and with the advent of social media and Instagram and that kind of stuff, you can see people, instructors kind of get wrapped up in sort of whether the hands really move out in transition or whether there's such a thing as the shaft shallowing too much. And it seems as if you're someone who kind of rises above that a bit, and you can't really be bothered with that sort of debate, because it seems like a competition of instructors' egos, really.
That's all it is. It's an ego. It's a dick whacking contest. And, you know, not if you actually sit them in a room and go, right, okay, let's apply some of that then. I often say, you know, I'd love to have a swing change competition, a swing change tournament. I know you never could, but I'd love to, because I can factually and evidentially change swings, every single swing within 5 minutes. I'll show you the difference together, not just visually, but I'll show you the TrackMan numbers different. I'll show you the torque forces different, whatever I need to change differently, put in a very simple bite-sized way. So, you know, these guys can sit there and debate about it and theorize about it, as which they all do, and they're all experts. A lot of them know it better than I do, but I know for a fact they can't apply it. And so they just sit there chatting about it and trying to make each other look bad or look good or whatever they get off on. And I don't engage in it. I just can't be bothered with it at all. I think it's the biggest waste of time. And it's just a big ego trip. Yeah. And, you know, I've always been about getting in the arena, getting in the trenches and applying it. And a lot of the seminars I do are almost counter seminars, right? I open up quite often saying, look, you guys have probably been to 50 seminars and you could probably do this one for me if you wanted, you know, but what you'll end up having is an amalgamation of ideas that doesn't fit together and no way of applying it. So the seminars I do are about the application of it. So I do some talks for Swing Catalyst, and the whole theme of my talk is the application of science. Yeah. You know, 'cause at the end of the day, that's what you got to do. You got to apply it. And, you know, I really don't like this online, you know, I'm better than you, I know more than you, I know McAgrady says this, so I'm sticking to that. It's like trying to change someone's religion when you start debating about it. I think this works. I think that's, well, okay, it's like telling a Catholic to be a Protestant all of a sudden. You're just going to have a debate, a fight, and waste your life and get stressed. So my number one rule is I don't get engaged in it. If you really want me to get engaged in it, I'll block you. And I'll just put stuff on there that's quite interesting and factual, and you can take it or leave it. As simple as that. I'm not there. I can teach 50 different swings to 50 different players. I can tell you that. I know swings from shut to open to one plane, two plane, one axis, two axis. I'm involved with quite a few studies of leg dominance at the moment. How shoes affect your swing is a really interesting thing we're doing. And again, it's not opinion based, it's fact based. So we've had, you know, a manufacturer donate 3 pairs of shoes. We've got the same guy on the Swing Catalyst 3D motion plate. We got him to whack balls in 3 pairs of shoes and just looked at the data. The facts are, one of those pair of shoes made him swing better than the other 2 pairs.
That's outrageous.
Shoes affect what you do, and a lot of people are wearing, especially young kids, are wearing the sneaker style, trainer style, right? So the heels raised and the toes down. So the sprinting, based on sprinting shoes, a lot of the kids are wearing nowadays. And we found in a lot of cases that gets your pressure moving onto your toes too early in your transition. And can
Shank City.
No, I can do all the stuff from there.
Yeah.
And we see a lot with kids. They early extend, they don't spin properly because they can't. They've locked themselves in. Really interesting story on that. Not trying to digress too far. Was Ricky Fowler had a great year one year, and the Dr. Scott Lynn worked with him a little bit on the Swing Catalyst 3D motion plate, and he played great one year. Then next year he played poorly, and they couldn't figure out why. And it turns out that Puma had sent him some of those high tops, basically, and with Velcro around the ankles. And he was a cool dude, so he wanted to look cool, right? So he was wearing these like Puma high tops. Well, they stopped his dorsiflexion in his legs and his ankles. He could not jump. He couldn't roll his ankles like he used to. When they put him on Swing Cat, he was like a different person. His pressure trace was all over the place. His vertical force was low. His jump force was low. And he took his shoes off. All of a sudden, bang, he looked all right. So, we're at that point where we're matching stuff to people's, really fine-tuning it, really. And, again, I don't get any debate because, what is good for Ricky Fowler might not be good for someone else, and might not be good for Tom, might not be good for Bruce. And, if I teach a certain type of swing to Ricky or a certain type of swing to you guys, a method teacher or being so entrenched in one way to do it is the worst thing you can do, because you're going to have, out of 100 people, you might have 2 you help and 98 you screw up. So, there's definitely more to it than you think. And I think, these coaches, again, you've got brilliant information, some stunning information out there, but how you apply it, how you put it together, there's not much information on that. And a lot of it is getting in the trenches and doing it. Yeah. And a lot of them just rather sit behind a keyboard and slag everybody off, which I don't think is the way forward. When you
have the amateurs come to you, and I know you've got your online swing coach that you can access at your website where people can send in their swings and you analyze it. I imagine what you get when you have people come to you is the end goal is they want to be a lower handicap, I imagine, on the whole. Do you find there are any commonalities between amateurs that you see, that there are certain ways that you can make pretty big improvements pretty quickly?
Yeah, easily. I don't look at how pretty a swing is. I look at the functionality of it. I look at how it fits together. So quite often, poor swings don't fit together. The sequence is not right, which is where the force stuff is really good, because you can say to someone, hey, you've got way too much horizontal force. I don't like too much mass movement, for example. And there's little checkpoints and reference points that help, that give you some sort of mental template. So, for example, by the time the lead arm's parallel going back, you don't want to have moved the mass more than, say, an inch. But you will need to have moved the pressure 75% in the trail foot, because you need to start to lighten the lead foot and make the trail foot heavier. And then, all good players, when they get to the top, as their lead arm's getting to, say, 11 o'clock, they are already recentering their body and moving their pressure by the time the lead arm's going back. And you don't see that in amateurs. When amateur players, they go back, everything kind of gets to the top, and then either the arms start down on their own or they just kind of hang there and everything goes together. We don't see that. All the elite players, as they go into the top, recenter and move their pressure and their mass. So by the time the lead arm's parallel again, coming down, the mass has moved 3 inches that way at least, and the pressure's now 75% in the lead foot at least. So, the timing and how it goes together is the glue that really holds a swing together. And so I don't see that in a lot of amateurs. I see very poorly timed swings, but really with a lot of misinformation to some extent. Everyone gets told to turn, which is the biggest load of crap ever. I never used that word in my life. Turn, well, that's just a loose turn, where the body goes too early and then the arms...
It's more about tilting, yeah.
Yeah, you've got to create an angled, or as you say, a tilted coil is what you've got to do. So the rate of coil relative to the arms is absolutely crucial if you want to create a sequence golf swing. If you're stood there and you say, okay, honey, turn, okay, well, your body gets there before the club, and then the club has to catch up, and then your body goes again and leaves it all behind. So, it's all sequence stuff that I work on with tour players as well, actually. But with a lot of amateurs, just the old-fashioned stuff, some of the myths, head still, head down, swing slowly, keep your left arm straight, turn, all that. It's absolute crap. And, I can think it's quite often you get someone who turns early and all the other stuff. They create no torque. You just say to them, hey, just feel like you don't move and just set the club and then move into it fast. They just go, I mean, the speed goes up 10 miles an hour like that, and the swing simplifies itself. It stays on a better track, because often the club coming off track is a reorganization of a really poorly sequenced action. So, you want to torque it together and glue it together like a catapult. So it hasn't got time to kind of throw itself around, really.
And just to finish with a couple of quick fire questions, if you wouldn't mind. I know you've been very generous with your time. What is your favourite event as a coach on tour that you enjoy going back to year on year?
British Open, easy one. It's just the best tournament in the world, in my view. I went as a kid. I love everything about it. The little yellow sign as you go in there gives me goosebumps still. The AA signs you see on the road. As soon as I see my first one, I'm like, oh. I actually managed to get one of those signs, actually. And, I've got two, actually. I sent one to Nick Faldo in his bar. And I've got one in my office, actually, and he signed it for me. That's the best tournament in the world, in my view. It's just special. I love the amateur side of it as well. I love a little amateur, a little club pro, or someone down the roads playing in it. It's so cool. The family's there. You can see the practicing next to Tiger Woods, and the one who asked for his autograph, but they don't want to look too uncool. And it's just brilliant. St Andrews, at night, there's someone playing football on the 17th fairway and stuff like that during a major. It's just absolute genius in how quirky it is, but how professional it is at the same time. And just the conditions and how good a player you've got to be to succeed in that. It's amazing. There is a lot of luck in the British Open, I will say that. You have to get on the right side of the draw, I tell you. If you get on the wrong side of that draw, you're going to struggle.
And final question, if there's one skill in golf that you had to pick above all the others, in terms of, the biggest sort of bang for your buck, as it were, and one skill that you were to encourage your players to develop, what would that be?
Putting.
Interesting.
Putting. Okay. You can putt it.
That's great. Yeah, I mean, a lot of people talk about the disparity between top 10 drivers and top 10 putters, but that is that's an interesting counterpoint to make to that.
No, talk to Phil Kenyon, and he's a brilliant putting coach, obviously, and look at the stats. Putting all day long. If you can putt, you're going to be all right.
Well, Jonathan, thank you so much for your time today. You've been very generous.
Appreciate it.
And we'll try and catch up with you soon, sometime in the future, maybe.
All right, man. Stay safe, and hope people will be listening to this out of the pandemic soon, and we'll look back on this period as part of our history, definitely. And as I say, good reevaluation time. So get out on the golf course, get playing, enjoy it.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jonathan. Thanks for having.
All right, guys.
Thanks for having you on.
Have a good day.
Watch this.